Hello gaming friends, DM Samuel here again with you today, and in this episode we are going to talk about Chapter 3 in the Pathfinder core rulebook. So here's the thing about this chapter. Because it is so long, I could make it one long video and put links and put breaks in the bottom so you could click where you wanted to go, but I think it's easier to split it up into 12 or 13 different shorter videos, because the videos are going to be relatively long anyway, each one, and I don't want to make a 12-hour video. So first I'm going to do the introduction and tell you about how the class entries are read, and then I will talk to you about the basics of the classes. Then I will make a separate video for each individual class, and then at the end I will make one video with companions and familiars and with archetypes. Okay, then we'll be done with Chapter 3. So first I want to point out, look at this amazing art. Again, with the really good art. You know, I wasn't thrilled about the art for Chapter 2, but Chapter 3 has an amazing piece of art. So here is Amiri, who is the iconic barbarian. She's fighting this strange, iron golem creature construct. She's not alone, though. She's with Ezrin, who is the iconic wizard, and Fumbus, who is the iconic alchemist. And the alchemist is the new core class. This chapter has 12 core classes in it. And so let's go ahead and talk about what you're going to find in this chapter. So the first thing that it does, instead of presenting any core class to you, is it tells you what you're going to see in this entry, and in fact in every class entry. And so if we go through that really quickly, what it's going to tell us is, first, these entries do not tell you how to level up. If you want to talk about leveling up, you have to go to page 31, which is back at the end of Chapter 1, and I talked about that in the Chapter 1 video. Animal companions and familiars are in this chapter, but they're not talked about in the individual chapter class entries, because several different classes can have an animal companion or familiar, so they put them all together in a block at the end of this chapter. And then archetypes, which is what basically is going to give you the opportunity to multi-class, that's also in its own section in the back of the chapter. And also there's all 12 class entries, and that's part of what makes this a really, really long chapter. Okay, so here's the thing. The very first thing that it does is it tells you the basics of the class in terms of the theme and idea of the class. Every entry is going to do that. It's also going to tell you your key abilities. That is, what's your key main ability that most of your class abilities are going to key off of, okay? It's also going to tell you the hit points that you get from your class. And remember, we already know that we get some hit points from ancestry. We know that from Chapter 2. This is telling you about the hit points you get from class, which is also going to determine what hit points you get when you level up. Because when you level up, you get your normal class number of hit points plus your constitution modifier. Then it's going to tell us in a sidebar about what proficiencies we get. And then it's going to give us an advancement table, which tells us at every level what we should be looking for. So you kind of have to reference your class section as you are leveling up your character, because it's going to tell you what features and boosts and skills that you get. In fact, what all does it tell you? Well, it tells you what feats you will be eligible for. It tells you what skills you will be eligible for. It tells you what general feats you're going to be eligible for, and when your abilities with those skills increase in rank. Okay. In this part of the chapter, it's going to tell us the overall layout of how every class works. So, for example, when it talks about class feats right here, it says class feats are granted beginning at first or second level, some classes at first, some classes at second, and then specific class feats are detailed at the end of each class entry. Skill feats are given at second level and every 2 levels thereafter, and that's true for every class. General feats are given at 3rd level and then every 4 levels after that. Skill increases specify what levels that your characters increase in their proficiency. Remember, in Pathfinder 2, you are either untrained, trained, you're an expert, or you're master level, or you're legendary. And your skills as you level up, as you go through your career in your class, those will increase in power. At 3rd level, and then every 2 levels thereafter, almost all the classes give you a skill increase. Some of them are slightly different, okay? And as you're going to see, the different classes get different numbers of skills. Once you get to 7th level, you can become a master. So no matter what the situation is, no class gets to master level with any skill until they've hit at least 7th level, and no one can become legendary until 15th level. So even though the classes go at slightly different paces in some cases, no one can get to master before 7th, and no one can get to legendary before 15th. And some don't get to legendary until 17th, 18th, 19th, okay? So it's not all at the same rate, but it's very similar based on different ideas about what's happening in each class, okay? Ability boosts at 5th level, and then every 5 levels, everyone's going to get an ability boost. Just like during character creation, if your ability is not 18 yet, when you get an ability boost, it boosts by 2 points. However, if it is 18 already, you can still boost it, but now that boost is only worth 1 point. So you can boost up from 18 to 19, or you can boost from 17 to 19. That's one of the boosts. And then it reminds us that we get ancestry feats, and every class gets ancestry feats at 5th level, 9th level, 13th level, and 17th level, and of course 1st level as well. When you first choose your ancestry, you get your ancestry feats. We talked about that in the video about chapter number 2. If you didn't watch that, you can feel free to go back and watch that, where I discuss all of the ways that the ancestry feats work. And then the book gives us this really nice 1-page overview of each class sort of in a nutshell, okay? And so it also has now created these little emblems or coin-shaped, little logos or tokens for each class. So this top one up here, the alchemist, that is showing you 2 little vials of material, alchemy, right? And it tells us where that class entry starts. So you've got a quick reference for what page you might need to go to if you're interested in, say, the ranger, but nothing before the ranger. Okay, and it also gives us a small little paragraph telling us about that class. So if you didn't know anything about any of the classes, or if you're confused, for example, the alchemist is a new class, if you're thinking, what the heck is an alchemist? Well, here it tells you. It says the alchemist uses their skill at crafting to create alchemical items, such as bombs, elixirs, and poisons, that they use to defeat foes and aid allies. Smart and resourceful, an alchemist often has just the right tool for the job and esoteric knowledge to help their friends get out of a jam. Okay, giving you the distinct impression they like to throw things at people or create things for people, and they feel like that description very much evokes a support class kind of role for them. If you are unsure, if this was the first time you've ever looked at a fantasy RPG and you don't know what any of these classes even really mean, or if you're coming from a different fantasy RPG that might not have some of these classes, like the champion and the alchemist, okay, you can read these and get a good idea of what it's trying to tell you about the class. And also it gives you this little emblem to show you. Now, one thing is they use this emblem again at the beginning of each class entry to get you used to seeing it, and then they use it in the equipment section to show you about kits. They give you a list of what equipment a typical PC of that class might carry around at 1st level. And they use these logos to implement that, to show you, oh, this goes with the monk, this goes with the ranger, that one goes with the rogue. I wish they did it more. I wish they implemented these logos more. They made really great logos, really great little seals, right? It's a little coin-shaped seal you could stamp on a page if it applies to a particular class. But frankly, this is the core rulebook, and there are a lot of rules spread out in a lot of different places, and so there's not often where they can put these emblems on a page and say, oh, this whole page is just about this particular class. So I understand why there's not a huge expansive use of this. They also use a similar kind of emblem idea for the bestiaries. And in that case, they use those all over in almost every monster entry. So I could see how they had the same kind of idea with the classes, but it kind of got away from them. So they don't use these as much going through. But they do use them at the beginning of each entry and then in the equipment section. So when I was editing this video, I realized that I really actually want to give you an overview of each class, so I'm going to go ahead and read the class entry for each of these to you. Okay, now I already talked about the alchemist, but I'm going to go ahead and read it again just for completion's sake. The alchemist uses their skill at crafting to create alchemical items, such as bombs, elixirs, and poisons, that they use to defeat foes and aid allies. Smart and resourceful, an alchemist often has just the right tool for the job and esoteric knowledge to help their friends get out of a jam. The barbarian, which starts on page 82, is a fearsome embodiment of rage, focusing the deadly power of their anger against anyone who stands in their way. A barbarian is quick to enter battle, and once their fury has been unleashed, is immensely strong, often unpredictable, and nearly unstoppable. The bard, starting on page 94, is an artist and a scholar. The bard uses performance and esoteric learning to bolster their companions and foil their enemies. Sometimes sneaky and quite often charming, the bard adventures with pizzazz and talent, backed up by an impressive repertoire of occult magic. The champion, starting on page 104, is a defender of good who straps on armor and wields a righteous weapon. The champion protects the innocent and vanquishes evil. Steadfast in their beliefs and devoted to both a deity and an aspect of good, they follow a strict code as they fight to make the world a better place. Now, if you think that sounds like a paladin, you are correct. Traditionally, the paladins of fantasy RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder are required to have a particular alignment. And then it's very difficult to still be a paladin of a different alignment. The way that Pathfinder 2 gets around that, the designers made the champion class. And based on what choices you make and sort of what subclass you are, although recognize in Pathfinder they don't call it a subclass, based on those choices you can either be a good paladin or maybe an evil paladin or a neutral paladin. Okay. The cleric, starting on page 116, is dedicated to the worship of a single deity and draws divine magic from this devotion. Clerics can be vastly different depending on who they worship, and whether they're cloistered clerics who pursue one of their deity's domains, or war priests who serve as the sword arm of their god. Now, that's calling out the two basic types of cleric that are in the core rulebook. They are very different. They get very different weapon and armor proficiencies based on what their general theme is, and so we'll understand that more when we get to the cleric entry. The druid, starting on page 128, walks the wild, primordial places of the world without fear, harnessing the primal magic of nature and controlling it with calm purpose. A devotee of the wilderness, the druid finds nourishment in its power, allies among its creatures, and strength in its fury. Next is the fighter, starting on page 140. With calculated daring and fearless determination, the fighter tracks down and confronts their enemies while defending allies from harm. A master of the battlefield, the fighter is quick to exploit opportunities and strike any who stumble within reach of their sword or bow. The monk, starting on page 154, seeks perfection in all things, and that includes transforming their body into the perfect weapon. They can be walking with calm purpose and contemplating the subtleties of existence in 1 minute, and then transform into a blur of deadly blows in the next. The ranger, starting on page 166, is resourceful and cunning. The ranger is a hunter, a tracker, and a warrior who preserves the natural world and protects civilization from its ravages. Whether they use a bow, crossbow, a pair of weapons, or snares, the ranger is a fearsome enemy and great ally in the wild. Next is the rogue, starting on page 178. Cunning and quick, the rogue brings skill and expertise few of their comrades can match. In battle, they excel at sneak attacks and ambushes. Their racket gives them tools they need to get the job done, and their wide array of skill choices lets them specialize as they see fit. Now, when it talks about their racket, that is actually part of your character creation as a rogue. You choose a racket. It's kind of like a subclass. Again, Pathfinder doesn't use subclasses, but that's the type of idea where you choose a theme called a racket if you're a rogue, and then that's how you build your character. Next we have the sorcerer, starting on page 190. The intense magic the sorcerer commands comes from neither study nor worship. It comes from their blood. Their magical abilities depend on whether they have the blood of dragons, angels, fae, aberrant creatures, or some other being flowing through their veins and powering their spells. This is your spontaneous spellcaster. And last but not least, the Wizard, starting on page 202. The Wizard is the arcane master of spellcasting, plucking incredible power from reality through complicated spell formulas. They stride with confidence, without a need for armor or weapons, enacting their will upon the world and bringing woe upon their enemies. And after this page, we get into the actual specific class entries. So you'll see that it begins with a piece of art of the iconic of that particular class, and then it provides us with all the information, just as stated in the beginning. It gives you your key ability, your hit points, talks about how you might behave during encounters, during exploration phase, during downtime, talks about how others might see you. It gives you a list of all of your proficiencies that you start with, and then it describes all of those. And then it ends with a list of feats. It also gives a couple of samples of building each different type of thematic version of a particular class, and then it ends with the feats, which you choose, and you'll notice all this wonderful art all the way throughout, and then it will move to the next entry. So I'm going to do the entries for the classes separate. I'm going to make a different video for each one, because otherwise they'll be too long, and again, I didn't want to produce a 12-hour video, okay? And so here you see the Barbarian, so you see that entry starts with a nice image, and then it gives you the summary, and then it will go on and give you more details, and then it gives you the feats. And that's how they go over and over and over for the entirety of the chapter, okay? And so here we are back at the beginning, and so I'm going to end this video, and I will tell you to look out for the entries for the different individual classes. I'm still going to name them Chapter 3, but I will then name them by class as we move through. So that's going to bring us to the end. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.